Welcome to Cultimatum, the podcast that delves deep into the culture and complexities of cults and human trafficking. Your hosts are myself, Anonymous Andrew, and Melody. Each week we explore different facets of cult life and human trafficking.
And I'm Melody. Having experienced the trauma of a cult firsthand, specifically the House of Yahweh, I'm here as an advocate for fellow survivors. My journey has inspired me to help others who find themselves in similar situations.
Our podcast is committed to respecting our guests' privacy. To ensure their comfort and safety, our guests can choose to remain anonymous or use a fake name.
And Andrew, before we get started, we also want to issue a trigger warning. Some episodes may contain potentially disturbing subjects such as sexual abuse, rape, human trafficking, suicide, and other sensitive topics. Discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And hello, Melody.
Hi, Andrew. How are you today?
I'm doing great. And we have a guest. Would you like to tell the audience who we have today?
We've got Lucia Muir. She is an ex-Jehovah Witness. She's also an author and a counselor. She wrote a book called Let Your Light Shine, Secrets in the Shadows, about her experience. And Lucia has agreed to come on the show and tell us her story. Welcome, Lucia.
Hi.
Welcome. Yes, hi. Welcome to the show. Where would you like to start with your story? You wrote a book. You want to start there, or the book is a result of your experience in the Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, I thought it was a good idea to write about all of my life in it. Just so I think a lot of people would find it helps them. And also some of their experiences could be similar to mine. But also I wrote about what my life was like outside of it as well when I left it at 16, because you're not taught social skills, you haven't got further education, and it's how that affects you in life and the choices that you make and the people that you meet. So I thought it was better to write all about that as well, and my experiences out of it and the times that I returned and then left it again, just so people could see, the turmoil that it puts you in and how you try to live life, but it's hard, especially with the shunning and everything that you experience.
Okay, so let's go maybe to the beginning of the story. I think you said you left at 16?
Yeah. I was born
All right,
in
take it from there.
Yeah, my parents got converted before I was born, because I had a severely autistic brother who went into a residential hospital at 6 years old, and my mum was very distressed about that. And so someone knocked on her door just after he'd gone into hospital, and she had questions about life, and they seemed to give her all the answers that she needed. And they obviously promised her that my brother would, survive and go into the new system and be well again, be cured of the autism. And so they told her things she wanted to hear, basically. So that's how, and that was 4 years before I was born.
And that's how they recruit. They tell you what you want to hear. They love bomb you. They promise you the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Exactly.
Look for a void to fill.
So how did you end up leaving?
I asked too many questions from a really young age. So they knew I was trouble. Also, I found it hard to connect with the God that they said we had to worship. They were saying, make God a friend, but you don't have any visual things, like in churches, you have like visual stuff that you can focus on that helps you connect, I think. But in Kingdom halls, you just have the chairs, a platform, the rostrum, and they say no idols, no symbols like that. And it's very hard to try and connect with something when you haven't got a focus there. And also, if you're being abused as a child, you feel that God's not looking after you anyway. So that makes it harder for you to connect as well.
Sorry to ask this, but when you say a child being abused, in what manner?
Sexual abuse.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But also some violence. And, I had a mother who had mental health problems as well.
Was the abuse from a member in the church?
Yes, yeah, they were chosen, but they were also a family member as well. So that made it sort of more awkward, I would say.
So they were a member of the Church of the Kingdom and a
Mhm.
family member, but were they? I don't know the terms in the Jehovah's Witness. Were they an elder, or did they have any
They
status or ranking?
they are an elder now. They
Oh, because they're still
he's
in
an
there.
elder.
Wow.
He's an elder now,
Oh, geez.
and the thing is, he's it wasn't just me; it was my sister as well, because the abuser was 17 and I was 6, and my sister was 4. So I thought at first it was because he was restricted, and he wasn't allowed to, how in their teens they're not allowed to sexually experiment with in dating and like other people do. So I thought maybe it turned in on children because he wasn't allowed to experiment with girls his age. But then I found that years later, one of his daughters came to me and said that he'd also done it to her and her sister when they were small. And she's in psychiatric wards because it was her father. It's nothing worse, really.
Yeah, that's
So
very
so
traumatic.
let me ask you a question, because this is just baffling to me. And we were talking. We were interviewed last night, and it really bothered me. This man is still in the kingdom, correct?
yes.
So there were no consequences to his actions. We're going
Well,
back 30, 40 years, maybe?
yeah. Well, it's not just, there was me and my sister, there was his daughters, there was also his wife's sisters as well, because they've told me that he was like that with them when they were small, because they're about my age. So there's been quite a few, and he's got grandchildren, and
Oh, God.
he doesn't have, because none of his children are now in the witnesses, so he doesn't really have contact with them. And
Good.
it was funny how he moved away. When I went back to the Jehovah's Witnesses for a while, he actually moved away, and he won't tell anyone where he lives now. And I am not sure whether it's because I told the elders what he did, and he's an elder, and I'm not sure whether he was advised to move away, because
I have a
no one
question,
knows where
Lucia.
he is now.
Well,
Was
Hmm.
there ever, I mean, is this just like known facts everybody in the organization knows and nobody's doing anything? Has anybody reported this to authorities? Like, did that go
Yeah,
anywhere?
the other elders, the other elders know. I did go to the police myself and told them, but they said that because it's historical case, they would be unlikely to get a prosecution. They said the only thing that they would do is if what his daughter came forward, they would then use my evidence to back her up, and then they would do something. But she's so disturbed, and it's really sort of, I just don't think she's in the right state of mind to do it. And because for years he kept telling her that she was sick and she was mentally ill, almost as if he was telling her that she imagined it, and she started to question it. But I remember when
Yeah.
she was about 2 years old, I remember him taking her into the Kingdom Hall toilets, and her coming out sweating after he'd taken her in there. And that's where he used to abuse her while the meetings were going on.
At 2 years old?
Yes.
And
Yes.
in the church?
Oh,
Yes.
Wow. That's
So,
and was there any
I
consequence within the organization?
no. Well, they all
No.
witnessed it. They all saw it, and they also saw that whenever he went to take her out, she would scream. She didn't want to go out. And, and everybody was sort of looking because they think, why is she screaming? Because he's taking her out. It's because she knew what was going to happen.
Right.
So,
Oh,
and
God.
she's so disturbed now and so confused. So I don't think she would ever prosecute him. So there's not.
So he's now. So you say we don't know. They don't know where he is, but he is an elder, probably in another kingdom
Yes,
hall
yes,
somewhere in Europe.
yes,
Yeah, very
yeah,
similar to what the Catholic Church did, the Roman Catholic Church, when
Right.
and that's my faith growing up. It's not today, but
mm,
when when the scandals hit in the U.S. about pedophilia, there was several decades where they were taking priests out of their parishes and just moving them to
yeah,
different parishes. So
yeah,
And
with no
unfortunately,
consequence.
we've heard that it's a pattern that all of these groups tend to use, is that instead of
mm,
reporting to authorities or trying to do something to help or stop this, they just move
mm,
the offenders around into different states, different churches, different parishes, different kingdom
mm,
halls, and try to
Well, they're
hide it.
trying to keep their name clean.
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. Rather
They're
than
trying
trying
to
to
keep their
protect
name
children.
clean.
That's right. That's what
Yes.
it's about.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So,
through your teenage years.
right. Okay. Teenage years. Yeah. I was rebellious because, I was sort of looked on as a black sheep anyway and scapegoated and everything. So I grew rebellious because of that. But also I could see, like with the religion and everything, I never really connected with it properly, like, most of them are. So I wouldn't say I was as brainwashed as other people. But yeah, I went in front of the judicial committee or the governing body. I went in front of them 3 times. Once when I was 13, because me and my friend were just telling each other some jokes we'd heard at school that were a bit risque. And a woman heard it and she went to the elders. So we had to go in front of the committee for telling jokes like that. And so
Oh my God.
we had a public reproof, and we also and then they give a talk on it. They announce you've been publicly reproved, and then they give a talk about it. So then people start to draw their skirts away from you once you've had a public reproof, because then they look on you as bad association. So that was the first time. The second time was when I was 16 and I ran away from home, because every time um, my dad was meant to rule the family, he wanted to be an elder, but because his wife wasn't under his control and his children weren't, it never happened. But every time they got upset with something he did, then, or we did, then he would get it. He'd get sort of dragged in the back room and they would have a go at him about it because he's meant to control us. So I thought if I ran away from home and I wasn't around, they wouldn't get on at my dad so much. So, but the thing is, my mum and dad come out, they got the police out and they found me. And because I'd run away with a older man at the time that I knew, when they got me back, the elders they interrogated me, because all they wanted to do, because I was away overnight, all they were interested in was whether I had sex when I was away overnight, and I hadn't. But
Let me
they,
wait.
Mhm.
Let me. I have to ask you a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
When you ran away,
mm.
they obviously the kingdom JW wanted to find out where you went. Did they get the police involved?
The police were following me because this man had a delivery job. And so I was in his truck all day going around doing deliveries. And we did see 2 police cars following us at the time. And I guess that they were watching the van.
So that they will
Yeah.
intervene,
Mm.
but sexual molestation they. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, no.
Well, no, it's a
I
good point.
get angry when I the more stories I hear of this, it's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it was like with my abuser. His daughter went and put a brick through his window, okay, and he took her to court for criminal damage.
Oh.
And that was when
Unbelievable.
she did put a statement in saying why she had done that because of the abuse, but then she later withdrew it. So
Right.
yeah, he was happy to get the police. Yeah. So anyway, when I ran away, yeah, they interrogated me about that and tried to dispute why. Because I said, you know, I was very tense that night because I'd run away, so I was too tense to have sex. And then they started to talk about how penetration could still happen even if you were tensed up. And I went, no, it can't. And they just wouldn't have it, you know. It was all sort of details like that. And of course, my dad was so embarrassed because they were talking to me like that in front of him as well. So
Wait. I'm sorry. They're concerned that when you ran away, you might have had penetrative intercourse, but
Yep.
they're not concerned that when you're 2 years old or 5 years old or 7 years old, when that part of the body is not ready for.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody's
I know.
molested
Okay.
and
Is
violated.
Yeah.
Am I missing something here? Oh my
No.
God.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Was it the police or was it the elders of the church?
The elders, what you do is
Okay.
it's 3 of them. It's 3 men. And if you're in there
course.
on your own with them, I wasn't on this occasion, but if you're in there on your own with them, do you know that they lock the door?
Of course. No, I
Yeah,
didn't know that, but
they lock the
I
door.
would.
They say it's so that no one can come in, but I think it's an actual psychological thing that they lock the door.
Oh, I'm sure.
But you know, when they question women, there's 3 men in a room with a woman, and they will lock the door. You know,
I wonder how many women that have been brought up before these 3 elders did they ever, when they locked the door. My imagination, unfortunately, is going. Yeah, you know where I'm going. I can't.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Some kind
because
of abuse
anything could
that
happen in that room. So the next time was when I was 16 again. I'd left school, I'd started going to work, and I worked in a shop, and an elder that I knew worked just around the corner from me, and he started to give me lifts home in his car. And he was married elder, and he started to make advances to me. Okay.
Of course.
So anyway, that happened a few times, and then after that, I met what they'd call a worldly boy, okay, through my work at the shop. And I started to, the only time I could see him was when I went home with him on the train, and that would be it. You know, he would just come home with me, walk me home, and that was it. So anyway, I stopped sort of having lifts with this elder. And so then he told my parents that I was seeing someone. And when they confronted me about it, I told them why I didn't have lifts home with the elder and what was happening there. So all that came out, and I had to go in front of the governing body again because of the thing with this elder. But he actually admitted it. He did admit that he'd been doing that. So, you know,
he had to go in front of the board too.
Yeah, he lost his eldership, but he wasn't disfellowshipped. With me, when they came to me, well, my parents were actually collecting me from work so that I couldn't see this boy, you see, so they were picking me up. And I thought to myself, if I was no longer in this religion, I can make my own choices and do what I want to do. So when the elders come round to talk to me about this other man, I asked them if I could. I told them to disfellowship me. I said I wanted to be disfellowshipped because I'd had enough. And they tried to talk me out of it, but I I stood my ground and I still said no. And they said, "Oh, so you're not sorry about what happened with this elder then?" And I said, "It should never have happened." Because they'll only disfellowship you if you're not repentant about something. So they were trying to say I wasn't repentant. And I said, that is not the case. I just want to get out. It's nothing to do with this elder, nothing to do with that. I just want to leave. And so
Right.
in the end, they gave in and they disfellowshipped me. So then.
And what age was that?
16.
16. Okay.
Yeah. So then I was in a room with my sister. So my parents moved me out of my sister's room and put me in the single room, and they put my little brother in with my sister. So because they said I wasn't going to influence her. And I stayed there until I got married at 17 to get away from home. Because my parents
Was it to the young man that you were seeing on the train? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it was awful at home. As you can imagine, the atmosphere was awful.
Sure.
My parents, they just spoke to me when they needed to. My mum would have rages and she would just fly at me with her nails, and she would pull me along the floor by my hair and stuff. So I just had to get out, really. I couldn't stay there. So they told me I couldn't leave home unless I was married, because they didn't want me to live with anybody. So I married him, and I lived in his mum's house for quite a few years before we got our own place. But then my first husband was a schizophrenic, and he knocked me about, and he took drugs, and he was a porn addict. He was like, so really, it was a case of out of the frying pan into the fire.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, but in one way, I had my freedom in some ways, because I was out clubbing. I went to London in the early hours of the morning. I was doing all the things that I hadn't done before. So, I saw a lot of life in that way. But of course, when with the abuse from my first husband, and then I unexpectedly got pregnant as well, and I couldn't go to the doctors sometimes because I was covered in bruises when I was pregnant, and they would have guessed what was going on. So sometimes I didn't keep my appointments. But then I felt very alone, and I went back to the Jehovah's Witnesses when I was 21 because I felt alone and felt like I didn't have anyone to turn to. So I went back for a while.
Is there a process when you are disfellowshipped?
Yeah.
Is there a process that you have to go through to get back in?
Yeah, you go. I went to the hall. You have to go to every meeting. You can't miss any. I went there for 6 months while being shunned. You just keep going and no one talks to you. And that went on for 6 months before they reinstated me.
Wow.
So,
and then how long after they reinstated you did you stay with them?
I went along for a while, and when my daughter was a baby, I was still going along. And then I started to fade and sort of stop going to the meetings.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in a flat, in a 1-bedroom flat with my ex.
With you?
Yeah.
Oh, with your ex?
Yeah, I stayed with him for about eight, nearly 9 years before I left.
So you divorced him, or you were still married when you went back?
Oh, I was still married to him when I went back.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
No, he didn't join, did he?
No, he wouldn't have joined it. He went along sometimes with me, but he never sort of because he liked to smoke and he wasn't going to give that up, and the other stuff he liked doing as well, so he wouldn't give that up. But yeah, so that was it, and I just faded and stopped going for a while, and then after I'd been married for about sort of 8 years, I then left him, and my daughter was 5 when I left him, and she'd seen a lot of violence and stuff, and social services stepped in and they said to me, you can stay with your husband if you want, but we will consider putting her into care. So I thought it's time for me to go, because they said that, because they were concerned for my daughter. But I just happened to meet a policeman at that time. And so when I left my first husband, I went to him, because I thought me and my daughter would be safe with him because he was a policeman. So, but yeah, so I divorced my first husband. I married the policeman, and we were together for 21 years. So it worked. And
But okay,
yeah.
one more time, because I'm just again confused. I'm stuck on this law enforcement not getting involved. So the law enforcement gets involved when you run away. Social services gets involved when they hear that that there's violence in the home, but they will not do anything about the molestation of a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Am I missing something here? I mean,
well, it's because it's not talked about. It's all just
right.
Swept under the carpet, as it were. See, when I told my parents that I was being abused when I was 6 years old, they had a word with the person concerned, but it was just all kept in the house. But then they told all my relatives that they had problems with me lying. So they were covering it so that if I told anyone else, they wouldn't believe me. And so none of my relatives, even the ones that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, have never believed me because of what was said when I was small. So yeah.
Was law
That's
enforcement involved when you were young, or no? Was law enforcement not involved at all?
What, with the abuse?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
with your abuse.
No.
So law enforcement was never involved, just the church.
Because I'm guessing they were not aware of it. Nobody. So,
well,
like you said, the elders knew, the family knew, but it never made it to law enforcement.
Never made it to the point of law enforcement.
No.
Okay.
Right.
No. And that's the thing. When you're small, you actually think that this goes on in other families. You just do, because you can only go by the way you're brought up, can't you? So
you think it's normal.
Yeah, you do. You think that that's what happens in families. It's only, I didn't know it was sexual abuse until I watched a documentary in my 20s. And then I thought, oh my God, that happened to me. But I hadn't actually, I knew, I told on what my abuser was doing, because I was upset, especially when he started on my sister as well, because, I was worried that she was getting hurt, because it was painful. It wasn't, wasn't a pleasant thing. And I was feeling protective over her. So I was worried she was getting hurt as well when he started on her. So that was when I told my parents about it. Because, and also I felt there was someone else to back me up as well. And I wasn't just telling them on my own.
That was
because my sister did, back me up.
Confirm your story.
Yeah.
Okay, so we left off that you met a police officer, and I'm guessing you married him.
Yeah, we got married. We were married for 21 years, so it was, he was a good provider. He raised my daughter, and because he was raising my daughter, I had another child. I had a son, so we were sort of. But I was really overprotective of my children, about who looked after them, I just watched them all the time, and there was something, I could see something. There were so many people that could have abused my children, but I noticed something. It's something in their eyes that I was picking up on. And I just had a feeling that and with quite a few of them, I tried to protect them as much as I could because I didn't want their childhood spoiled like mine was spoiled. But yeah, so when I was married to the policeman, he didn't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses and he wanted to learn about it. And I told him what I wasn't comfortable with. So he started going to the meetings.
Oh, God.
My parents were delighted because they thought he was actually going to join it, but that wasn't the reason he went into it. He started to have a Bible study and everything. And then they started to suggest that I had a study with them. And then I told them the problems that I had. I told one of the women that was studying with me about the abuse that I had as a child. And she said to me, "Oh, you've got to forget about all that now. It's a past memory. Just put it behind you. Don't think about it." And that was her thing for it. But then when the person who was studying with my husband, when they said to him if he stayed in the Jehovah's Witnesses, he could no longer be a policeman, he left it because he wasn't going to give up his career for them because
Good.
they don't want policemen in the religion.
Of course not. Of course not. Because God forbid the policeman. So did at the time, so you introduced him to JW and he went to some of the meetings and whatever you call them. And did you tell him about what you endured as a child there? Did he know about your?
Yes.
And yet he went anyway. Do you think he went to see what was going on, or he was generally curious about?
Well, it came to a head when my sister got married and I went to her wedding. And when I went to her wedding, sort of family were there, including my abuser. And a friend of my sister's husband hadn't bought a gift for the wedding. And so I said to him, because he said he wanted to go into town to choose something. And I said, "Do you want me to help you?" And he said yes. So we left the wedding reception. We went into town. And while we were in town, he actually met his mother there. So we went for a drink before we came back. So we were gone a little while. And then when we came back, my family was sort of looking at me all accusingly. And apparently my abuser that was there said that day I dressed like a whore. And he said that I was gone long enough to have done something sexual with that man. Right. So when I heard that, I was very angry. And I wrote him a letter and I said, "How dare you say those things about me after what you did to me when I was 6 years old? You make me sick." And of course, he come rushing round my house, worried that I was going to go to the police. My parents came with him. And he actually admitted to my husband. He said, "I was only 17 at the time. I didn't know what I was doing." And my husband said, "When you're 17, you know exactly what you're doing."
Absolutely.
So he actually admitted it. And yeah. But
So
he was just, no. But the thing is, he didn't think I knew about that. And at that time, I didn't know about that. It was after that I heard about what he'd done to his daughters. So, so he'd actually admitted it in front of my husband and two of my husband's friends who heard it too. And so at the time, I just said, "Look, I'm not going to do anything." And they left thinking that I wasn't going to take it any further. So that was what happened then. after all these things happened, I actually wrote a letter of disassociation. I disassociated myself from the Jehovah's Witnesses again because, it was no different. It was all the same thing.
Right.
So
Right.
then
And how
I
and
stayed.
that was
Hmm?
that was while you were married to the police officer.
Yeah,
And how old were you then?
26.
Okay.
Because I married him when I was 26. So
Okay.
yeah, I was married for quite a few years. Didn't go to the church. Didn't go. Then in 2002, I heard that my friends told me that my uncle had died, and that was my dad's brother. And they told me the name of the undertakers. I phoned them up and they said, "Oh, the funeral's already happened. It happened last week." And no one had told me that he died. So I went to the grave myself with some flowers. I found where it was to lay some flowers, and I saw all the ones that everyone else had left from the funeral. And I wrote a letter to my parents and said, "Why did you not tell me that my uncle had died?" And had a go at them about it. And then the following year, my autistic brother died in 2003. My dad actually did phone me when he died, and they told me where the funeral was going to be. So I went to the funeral. No one spoke to me. And also they had it in the little chapel in the cemetery at the time because they wouldn't have it in the Kingdom Hall because my autistic brother was not a Jehovah's Witness because he was in hospital. So they had it in the little cemetery chapel, but the coffin was by the grave. My mum wouldn't have it in the chapel because if she didn't see it, it wasn't happening. So it was that kind of thing. But then I was able to sit with the coffin and spend some time with it before they came out to bury him. So that was good for me in a way. But they didn't tell me where what they call the wake or the gathering afterwards was, because the elder who made advances to me when I was 16 was actually holding the gathering at his home because he was still very close to my parents. Because at one time my mum said to my husband, "That poor man lost his eldership because of our daughter." So
Please.
yeah,
Oh.
so that's where the blame lay.
Such
As far as they're
backwards thinking,
concerned.
because I would have been like, no, we're not going anywhere near your house because of what you did to my daughter. That's insane.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's go. I'm just curious about the marriage with the police officer. So he was a good man to you and the
Yeah,
children? Like
he
no
looked
violence?
after us. No, he wasn't violent.
Good.
He obviously my daughter was very much, because of the mental health problems of my first husband, my daughter was very much like him, and we had problems with her as she was growing up. She went to, she saw psychiatrists, she saw different people. I was worried that she'd been abused, and I was trying to find out if something had happened to her that I didn't know about because of the way she was behaving. So we did have a lot of problems, and so it was difficult because it is difficult for a man when a child is not his own to bring them up, especially if you've got problems with them as well. So
Right.
so that wasn't easy. My son
All right.
seemed okay, yeah.
So
But yeah, the marriage went on for 21 years, and
can I ask what ended the marriage?
I think it was sort of wanting different things out of life. He retired from the police force. He wanted to do different things. We
That you
both,
weren't interested in.
yeah, Yeah, he wanted to travel, he wanted to do things, and sort of just different. And we both had different outlooks on life. It seems to happen a lot to couples when children are growing up. You're so busy raising a family that you're changing as people and you don't realize it. When the children leave home, sometimes couples look at each other and think, I don't know you anymore because you've
Right, right.
changed, and then you're
You
both
just
different
grew apart.
people. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
you grow apart. So yeah, that's basically what it was. Um,
So
and
what year was that when the marriage ended?
oh, the divorce was 2012.
Okay.
So yeah,
And when did you write your book?
I'd been writing that book over a period of about 10 years. So
Wow.
After the marriage or while you were married, you started writing it?
I started it while I was married, but then, family life happens and then you leave it for a while and then you try and go back to it and everything. But yeah, yeah. And
So the
also
book
I wouldn't,
I'm sorry.
both my parents are dead now, so I wouldn't have probably published it while they were still alive.
Sure.
But they're gone now. So yeah, in 2015 or no, 2014, I started to have contact with my parents because my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and they allow you contact if someone is terminally ill. And I think that's so that you look after them and they don't have to. The organisation, they sort of get rid of the responsibility. I'm sure that's what it is because
Yeah.
you are so happy to have contact. You would do anything to help them, and
Mhm.
they know it. So that's what they do. Um, so yeah, I had some time with my dad for a year before he died. I sort of went to see him quite a lot. And we talked, um,
I
and
have a question
yeah, and
about
I was.
medical treatment. Do they allow any medical treatment? I don't even know if your dad's cancer was treatable, but do they allow any treatment if it is treatable, or is that something that they don't allow?
Well, it was terminal,
Oh,
and then he had secondaries all over his body. So um, there wasn't a lot they could do. They tried to give him because he was elderly, he was in his 80s. They tried to give him some
mm.
mild chemo, but it didn't work because it was too far gone.
And so that was
Um,
Too
allowed
far
by the
advanced.
church
Yeah.
then. They would
yeah,
have allowed him to get treatment.
yeah,
Okay.
Well, remember they basically
mm,
passed him off to her.
Right.
So I would imagine they probably wouldn't have had anything that they could have said or done if they were saying he's yours now, you take care of him. I guess
Then it's
let's
your
say
decision.
his cancer was caught early and was treatable. I would
mm.
imagine Jehovah's Witness would have allowed you to take him to the hospital, but
Well,
that's a different scenario. So
I lived I lived too far away to actually be able to be there all the time. So I travelled, to see
Mm.
him.
right,
Um, but it's the difference it's like my sister she just faded. She stopped going. She never got disfellowship because then she knew she could have contact with everyone. Um, and she'd been living with her boyfriend, and the Jehovah's Witnesses knew this, but because she did a lot to look after my parents, they turned a blind eye and they never pulled her up on it. They left her to get on with it.
it's amazing
Um,
who they pick and choose their
yeah,
battles.
that's
Interesting,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, they do. So yeah, so all the family helped. Jehovah's Witnesses did a bit, but not that much. They do leave the family to get on with it. So yeah, so
So
when
it no, I was going to ask you. So your book is a synopsis, a story of this whole experience of
yeah,
what you're sharing with us today.
yeah, yeah, it's got all that in it and more. But because
And you named Jehovah's Witness. You named the organization.
Yeah, I've done.
Yeah. Okay.
Good for you.
So
did you get any kickback from them?
No.
Like when you published it? No.
No, I haven't heard anything.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah. So anyway, my dad passed away, and I went to the funeral, and to the bit afterwards. My dad was, he had a lot of friends. It was over 100 people there at his funeral, so he had a good turnout. But after that, after the funeral was over, I went to see my mum to see how she was with my son, and she opened the door and she wouldn't let me in, and she said, the funeral's over now, so it goes back to how it was. Because see, I promised, my dad asked me to go back to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and so I kept my promise and I did go back because I was grieving at the time, and I think I was getting some comfort from being where he liked to be, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So I went there and I got reinstated after a few months of going, but then they didn't agree with where I was living. They wanted me to move out of where I was living. They also were interrogating me about my life, and whether there was a man in my life, which there was not. And, it was all along the sexual lines again, trying to sort of say you're doing this and you're doing that. And I said, no, I'm not. But that's the thing. They didn't agree with the type of work that I did. And surprisingly enough, when I got reinstated, I managed to actually keep that from them, of the work that I was doing at the time. And
which was?
I do a number of things, actually. I do psychic work. And,
okay. Oh, of course they're not going to agree with that. No.
And holistic therapies and stuff like that, So,
right. Okay.
And they called me in. They sent me a text and said they wanted to see me at the Kingdom Hall. And so I thought it might be something to do with my mum, because my dad had just died. So I went along there, and the hall looked like it was locked, but the door was open. So I walked in, and there's two men sitting in the back room, and they said, "Oh, come in here. We'd like to talk to you." There was no one else in that hall, and they still locked the door. No one else was going to walk in. So, I thought, yeah. So then they started to really interrogate me about my life. They said, we found some things on the website that we find disturbing, and it was about my work, and they were saying, oh, God. And, and I did some performance at folk festivals and things, and they said, "Is this you?" And I said, "Yes, it is. Look at the way you're dressed." And I was in a top hat and a long coat and sunglasses. And I said, "There's nothing wrong with that. Is this how a Jehovah's Witness would dress?" And I went, "No, probably not." And then they were saying, "Oh, look at what you've been doing, this psychic stuff. And there's a black candle." And I said to them, "It's a candle and it's black, and you'll see into it whatever you want to see into it," sort of thing. Then they started asking me about sexual stuff, and I said, "Nothing is going on." And one of them started to shout at me, and so I shouted back at him as well, because I got so angry that they were interrogating me, and they were sort of telling me that because the person that I was staying with was also into psychic work, things like that, I had to move out of there and never see her again. And I said, "She has been nothing but kind to me. She took me in. I would have been homeless after my divorce if she hadn't have let me stay with her. So, I thought, why should I move out and never see her again?" So, yeah, so I argued with them about it. And even though, I was staying with a woman, and but even though I was living with a woman, they wanted to know if we were having sex as well. They started asking me about that.
Oh my gosh. Of
Oh
course.
God. So anyway, I left and they wanted me to come back for a judicial committee. And I said to them, I will not be in that room with you unless another woman can be present. And they refused. They wouldn't let another woman be in the room with me. So I said, I'm not going then. And then they disfellowshipped me. And that was in 2016. So, and I would never go back.
You really good. And so you've really only been out now 8 years or so.
I was in it for 9 months before that happened. So I was only in it for 9 months because I was far too confident. I was not scared of them and they knew it. And I don't think they wanted me influencing other women there. So they thought they'd get rid of me. They was just looking for excuses to get rid of me, basically. So
I'll use a British term. They thought you were too cheeky and they didn't want you there.
Oh yeah. I think that's probably. No, I think because other people,
and I think it's a good thing
to say. And so anyway, my mum died suddenly in 2020. She had a blood clot to the heart, and just went. Which was very hard for my youngest brother. My youngest brother has got Asperger's, and he's, my dad had died sort of for the next 5 years. He hadn't got over it. He started to question God, why has God let this happen? All this, right? And then my mum dies right in front of him. He was with her when she died.
Witnesses too.
He's in it, and they said to him that if he has any contact with me, that he won't see his parents again. So he won't have contact with me because of that, and he's too frightened to come out of the Jehovah's Witness. He's questioning it, obviously, because he's lost his parents and he never thought he would, because they told us all that we would never grow old, we would never die. They never thought they would grow old. And my mum was so angry. When she got to her 80s, she was bitter and she was angry because she never thought she'd be there. So, and she kept saying she wasn't going because, she was still hanging on to life, hoping that Armageddon would come and so she would never have to die. And she kept saying she wasn't going, but she's gone now. And I hope that wherever they are now, because I do believe in life after death, I hope they can see the truth of everything, because I do think that's one of the biggest lessons that you learn. You live your life, and when you die and you look back, you see the truth of everything. All the things you thought were right that probably weren't. All the things that were hidden and that's part of it. I do believe that. So, yeah.
Okay, Lucia. So let's begin to wrap up. How are you today, and what is your life like today? You working? Are you remarried?
No.
Okay.
I'm not going there again.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you.
Yeah. No, I'm okay. I've got good work, and I'm very busy as well. I haven't got a religion. If I did feel a link with any type of religion, it would probably be the spiritualist, because they say it doesn't matter what you believe because it's the spirit world that connects us all. And I think, that's a good way of thinking about it. So there's no judgment on anything you believe. So I quite like that. But I don't go to a church. I don't, I just get on with my own stuff. And
I think you've had enough of church
your
whole life. So
yeah,
I think so. Yeah. But,
okay. If you like, we can promote your website or the work you do. If you like, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, I've got a Facebook page under the title of my book, so people can follow that, and and they can
good.
message me
Oh,
there.
good.
And also with the counselling side of things, because I do help ex-cult members and things in my counselling. So
Wow, that
if anyone
is
needs help,
wonderful.
especially
Well, we for
because
sure
there's
want to
plenty
put
of
that in
help in
notes.
America, but there's not so much in the UK, you see. So I think people need ones that understand what they've been through. So yeah, if there's anyone in the UK that needs, to contact
Well,
me.
and this is something Melody and I and we were on another podcast last night, and it's something that we've been talking about, is that there is no awareness today in 2024 about these cults. Now, Jehovah's Witness has been around a long time, but there's all these
Yeah.
other cults that have popped up over the years. Some are new, some have been around for decades or centuries. But people, one of the things that I keep saying over and over again, that I'm just astonished and surprised about how many there are, and how they're getting away with what they're getting away with, and how nobody is looking into them. And that's why I was questioning you about the law enforcement earlier. It just seems like there's nothing. The politicians, I'll speak for the United States, the federal government, the local police, law enforcement, they just look the other way. In most cases, I mean, we do know that there are some leaders that are now doing time, but I think that's far and few in between. So it's great that you're doing that, and so Melody, you'll put all of her information in the show notes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
So if you
All
could
right.
just send that to
Lucia,
me.
any parting words before we say goodbye?
What I'd like to say is, for anyone out there that is disfellowshipped and being shunned, you can make another life for yourself. You can learn social skills. You can still get further education and build your life after you come out. Just because you weren't taught while you were in it how to deal in the world, you can do it. And there is hope for that, because so many commit suicide. I want to sort of say to them, don't, keep strong and have belief in yourself, and know that you are worth it. And don't listen to what they've said to you.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because there are many people, and in just some of the Facebook groups that Melody and I are in, there's thousands of people that have joined these groups. So yes, you're telling people to keep hope. There are many people who are looking for support, and so Lucia, thank you so much for your story.
That's okay.
It was a beautiful closing message. We so appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story and your experience and your hope with all of us.
Yeah, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Have a very good evening. I know it's probably very late over there for you.
Yes.
But thank you again.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, Andrew, that was a great interview with Lucia. And I just want to mention too, again, to all the people out there that might be recovering from being an ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, there are lots of support groups, quite a few of them available on Facebook. You can go just look up like ex-Jehovah's Witness or Jehovah's Witness survivor support, and you can find that out there on Facebook. But she is so resilient for dealing with not just the abuse that she suffered, but going in and out of the group multiple times, being disfellowshipped, all of that. A very interesting story.
Out of all of the cults we have done so far, and really we haven't done many.
Right.
This one, Jehovah's Witnesses, and we did remember Gary. We had Gary on.
Yes.
And he was an elder.
Yes.
What an organization that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Controlling.
Yes.
They just seem to be really, listening to Lucia's story, the way she left and came back, multiple times as if she really didn't have anywhere else to go. I just find that amazing. That
Well, and the way they tried to control her, and the way the stipulations they would put on when she tried to come back, being shunned. What was it, for 6 months or something? She was shunned, and and a lot like the La Luz de Mundo, it's a very widespread organization. It's in multiple countries. I mean, and she's a perfect example of that, because Lucia's in the UK, but then we know that there are lots of Jehovah's Witnesses groups right here in the US too. So
I have a sister who lives in northwest Pennsylvania. Right on the border of New York and Ohio, I think. And it's like God's country. There's nothing up there. And her and her husband have a little farm thing going on, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area of Pennsylvania. And literally driving up this dirt road, or not, it's a paved road, but going up to her place, there's a Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall right there.
And it seems out in the middle of nowhere.
You can't miss it. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
I'm like, I think the population in that town is like 5,000. I shouldn't even say the town, because although there is a university up there, there's Mansfield University, but so maybe a little bigger than I thought, but still a JW Kingdom Hall in the middle of nowhere.
Crazy.
So, the last place you think you'd find that. So anyway, really, really bad cult.
And we want to just thank everybody for tuning in to Cultimatum. Your support is greatly appreciated. Please take a moment to rate our podcast on platforms such as Apple or Spotify. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
You can also show your support by joining our Facebook group community, which is called Cultimatum. If you'd like to share your story with us, and you can email us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
For additional support and resources for ex-cult members, you can also consider joining Cult Escape and Recovery Facebook group.
And if you'd like to hear more of me, Anonymous Andrew, you can find me on Anonymous Andrew Podcast, Life and the Choices We Make. And Melody, great episode, and we'll talk next week.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to Lucia.